Welcome to And Yet. This is the second video in our Faith After Doubt series with Brian McLaren. In the first series, just to kind of recap here, we talked about how hard it is to deal with doubt because of the loss, because of the crisis, because of the loneliness that may occur when you start doubting beliefs, especially beliefs in a system like a faith tradition. He then went on and started to talk about development and the developmental stages that happen not only in faith but also in life. And if you remember, last time we talked about the first two stages. The first stage was called simplicity, and it was a very dualistic stage where you looked at things as either right or wrong, good or bad. There was very strong authority figures that maybe could be very authoritarian. And there was also a lot of judgment that happens in stage one. In stage two, we talked about, talked about complexity. And so you were learning in stage two to be more independent. You would kind of read the Bible more your own way, but it was very much built on success. And learning things and gaining that mastery and control, but the main goal was to be successful. Now we're going to start to take a look at that third stage, and that stage is called perplexity. So, what can happen with stage two Christians is that they can become very disillusioned with either religious leaders or the organizations themselves, or they have programs that don't provide the results they need. If you remember, stage two is very much on, okay, just give me the steps so that I can master this task. Well, if something happens and they either aren't more spiritual or their finances aren't going the way they want with a program that they may have taken through a church, they can become disillusioned. And what happens many times with people that have problems in stage one or stage two Christianity, instead of moving into stage three perplexity, they will make a lateral move. So they'll go to another church, or they may even go to another denomination that functions on the same stage level. And so there can be a lot of church shopping that goes on in this stage. Sometimes stage two Christians may go back to function as a stage one Christian. This doesn't happen real often, but if it does, they can become very, very rigid stage one Christians. Many times people will become nuns, and that's NONES, having no church affiliation at all. They leave the religious organizations that they either grew up in or whatever because their needs aren't being met. And what they may do is they will find that quest for success in either personal development things outside of the world of faith. Some stage two Christians will move on to stage three. And when they do, it's a big jump between stage two and stage three. They realize that life is much more of a mystery. And it definitely is much more messy. And they want a depth and an honesty. They don't, want to have simple, easy answers. Things become much, much more gray in your working in a stage three development. The problem is that because they are doubting, because they are looking at things outside of the box, they are often threatened with being way too liberal, whatever that word means now, or they can even be seen as evil because they're moving away. And that's why I think a lot of people leave traditional religion, because they are starting to see things differently, and because most places operate on stage one and stage two, they are so the outsider that they're not accepted. So in stage three, you're moving past the dualism. So you can see that life is more simple, and it is also more complex. People in stage three and organizations in stage three will take a look at things more outside of the box as well. They may look more at books and podcasts, classes, graduate programs, conferences. Sometimes they find some of these educational things better and meet their needs better than what organized religion is doing. This gets a little bit into what we talk about at Augustana is how your faith and how your life interact. And so people will see outside of the box on that. So what you can find many times is that stage 3 people may be lurking around the fringes of one or many groups. They may be involved in, a variety of different kind of spiritual and spiritual-led groups. Stage 3 Christians, there's a distrust because of the thinking process. And so they distrust some of the structure and authority. There's a little bit more suspicion of really, are we really accomplishing our goals and what are we doing here? The thing that's interesting about stage 3 is that everything is relative. So they know that everyone has a viewpoint and what they are seeing is coming from their worldview. So for me, I'm a white female, and I would see things differently than a white male or a black male, all right, or somebody who has come from a different country. What happens is that you see things from your point of view. And by the time people get to stage 3 perplexity, they actually can start to see some of this. So the problem is that even though this seems like a very messy stage, the suspicion and the doubt, they're not enemies. They're actually moving you into more insight and liberation. And the other thing is that this stage is also fun because there can be a lot of learning and learning and critical thinking and a lot of curiosity, a lot of wonder. The other thing that happens is there's more humility and openness, and those are some of those gifts from stage 3. That idea of trying to be honest and open even if the answers are not quite as clear. All right, this I think is interesting, and it's also interesting, very interesting for Augustana. Brian McLaren was asked to do a consulting project on a lot of different seminaries and seminarians and churches, and taking a look if the seminaries were really teaching their pastors to be able to go out and work in the churches. And what Brian McLaren found in a lot of different denominations was, yes, these seminaries were doing a good job of moving their students through developmental stages and helping them see a bigger picture. The problem is that it didn't work when they got back into their congregations. So this is why, because most people in stage 1 or stage 2, which is most of our congregations, they just want sermons that make them feel good about what they already know. They don't want to know about the uncertainty. They don't want to be led into the unknown. So they come to church for comfort, to hear the old familiar hymns and old familiar themes, but they want it presented with just enough freshness to keep it interesting. So what happens is when these pastors come into their congregations excited about challenging people, helping them grow in their faith, oftentimes it's the congregation that doesn't want to move in that direction. So, if you are going to move in your faith, you will eventually get to a dark tunnel, a place where it is kind of the shadow side, and you do not know, there's a doubt, there's a whole loss of certainty, and it can many times feel like dying. Jesus went through this descent. My God, why have you forsaken me? Let this cup be taken from me. We cannot move forward unless we doubt and we hit a sense of descent. So, for you, how have you handled times of questioning and doubt? Have you buried them and told them, okay, no, that isn't comfortable, I'm not going there? Or have you tried to move through them and to be able to see what comes out on the other side? The problem is that many people have been taught that only stage 1 and stage 2 Christianity are the only valid forms. So if this means that that fails you, then what happens? Do you become a nun? Do you leave organized religion? Do you go and search someplace else? So think a little bit about that and how that may affect you or affect people that you do know. So sometimes expressing or even entertaining doubt takes so much courage. We may say it takes faith to doubt. And I think that there is a truth in that. It takes a lot of faith to doubt. The stages build on one another, and it's not that one stage is better than the other. We need all of these stages, and as you will see later, a little bit later on, we bounce around from all of these stages. In stage 1, we've accumulated a knowledge of what is right and what is wrong. We've learned to care and stand for something. We recognize authority figures and how to react to them. We get a sense of certainty so that we can move away from that uncertainty and be comfortable. In stage 2, we develop some of all of the skills that we need to be a Christian in the modern world. We grasp concepts and theology. We understand theology better. You've learned to be more curious and flexible. Take responsibility for success and failure. There is a real sense of what successful and knowledgeable and in control is during a stage 2. And we need those things to move us forward. But in stage 3, there's a lot more disruptive loss. There can be a loss of faith, there can be a loss of God. But stage 3 can bring some of the greatest spiritual gifts that life has to offer. For example, humility is the main one. As new understanding and knowledge grows, the unknown becomes more vast. It's another way of saying the more you know, the less you know. And what McLaren says is that acknowledging how little we know is at the core of mature faith. It also is at the core of maturity in general. The more you know something, the less you will know of it. They also experience a sense of mystery and mysticism. All right? As we move into looking where our faith meets our life and we see God in absolutely everything, there is a mystery that's there. And if you think back to the Old Testament, all the stories of dreams and all of the weird things that seem to happen, that was a sense of mystery. And we moved from that, and many people take a look at that as an immature faith. And I am wondering if we have only missed out because we've shut that out away from our faith, the mystery and the mysticism. Now, unfortunately, people in stage 1 will see mysticism as bad. You mention mystics, you mention anything like that, it's like, this is bad. First of all, most mystics were Catholic, and heaven forbid we're Protestant. So we don't want to be doing anything with that. Or even worse, they would see mysticism as something that is very evil. Stage 2 would see mysticism kind of as irrelevant. You know what? There's too much to be done. We have too much to be done to sit around and meditate and contemplate and do that. There is just too much to get done. There's too many things that we're moving for. What are the goals that we're moving to? How are we putting these things together for our organization? So mysticism in stage 3 is going to be something that by other stages are really looked down upon. But there were many Christian mystics in our past and even in more of our present. Julian of Norwich, Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, Thomas Merton, Howard Thurman, John Muir. These are all people that are mystics. And remember, mystics see God in our daily life. They see heaven on earth. And that is the piece that can be oftentimes missing until you start to move into more of a stage 3. Stage 3 also has a sense of more self-knowledge. You know yourself better in stage 3. You've done some real introspective things. You know the shadow side of yourself, and you are moving towards accepting that as being okay. You're also used to the dark night of the soul. This may be something that happens during any kind of a loss or grief, but if you have gone through a dark night of the soul, you know that it is not something that you want to avoid, because it is actually a passageway to become closer to God. That doubt, that grief, that sense of loss, that loneliness happens. And during that, if you're willing to be open to it, there can be a deeper union with God. You also have more insight in stage 3. You start to see things that you would never be able to unsee. For example, if people have moved into stage 3, they really probably would not be able to move back into a stage 1 type of mindset, because they see some of the prejudice and some of the narrow-mindedness that ends up hurting people in the long run. There is a lot more courage that comes in stage 3. It is the courage to doubt. It is the courage to speak what you know is your truth right now. And there is a loss of fear of the gatekeepers. And if you remember, we talked about the gatekeepers are people. They can be leaders. They can not be leaders, but they're people that want to keep things the same. They are going to keep those gates strongly closed. So anything that talks about things outside of the box are going to be fought against and seen as evil. In stage 3, critical thinking is what really starts to happen. There is a more holistic understanding of good and evil, right and wrong. There is a lot more seeing things in gray. There is not as much either or. And so there will be, people will kind of sometimes seem like devil's advocates as they bring out different ideas. There is an awful lot of and yet in what they do and what they see. And Jesus, of course, was here. He did this. He dissented from the typical understandings of purity, loyalty, authority, and liberty. Now, did he throw the baby out with the bathwater? No, he didn't. Okay? He didn't say those things were bad. What he said was that those things should be always put in the terms of how does it deal with justice and compassion. And justice and compassion can be seen as love. How is it that it can be just and compassionate? So you see, stage 3 perplexity it's not destructive, even though it challenges, but it is not immoral. It is a stage that is moving us towards the 4th stage, which is harmony, and that is love. There is mystical or contemplative insight into harmony, and that harmony will be faith expressing itself in love. All right, faith was about love all along. We just didn't realize it, and it took doubt to help us see it. That is a quote from Brian McLaren. I think what is interesting about that is I think people all along, if you're connected with a religious organization, you think that you are promoting love. And, the kind of love that we're talking about here is truly the unconditional kind of love. It's not that you are going to pray for a homosexual to change their ways and become more Christian. All right? It is an unconditional love of loving everybody where they are at. So as you say that, that's not so easy to do. Sometimes I may think that I try to do that, and then I realize underneath there is a judgment, there is a criticism that is there. So, thinking about this as you move into this stage of changing your beliefs, doubting beliefs, being more uncertain about your beliefs. Is there something, whether it's religious or not, that you feel like you used to know and you no longer do? And what is your understanding of the dark night of the soul? Have you ever gone through that? Do you know somebody who has? What is that and how does that mean for you? Okay, we are now moving into harmony stage 4. In stage 1, you added the dualistic thinking, the either-or thinking. In stage 2, you added pragmatic thinking. How do we get what we want? How do we be successful? And in stage 3, you took to look at critical thinking and deconstructive thinking, or, are we really accomplishing what we want here? In stage 4, it's a whole new skill, and it is a non-dual way of seeing. So, in a non-dual way of seeing, knowing and unknowing, faith and doubt, clarity and mystery are not opposites. It's not either or. They complement one another. With every piece of clarity, there's a mystery to it. All right? With every piece of faith, there is a doubt that's to it. With everything you think you know, there is something that you really don't know. So in stage 4, we become more capable of non-dual seeing and thinking. This is the way mystics and contemplatives encounter the world. We hold things in bigger units, all right, so that we can have diversity without division, which means we can have a congregation with people at all stages of faith development and not be divided. We can hear difference without dissonance. Now, think about that one. Can you hear something that is very different from what you believe and not either want to come up with an argument, or are you critically thinking that, oh, okay, well, yeah, they may think they're right, but they're not, and you're judgmental? So harmony is that stage where God's love actually comes through us. All right. This is probably, as far as I'm concerned, one of the most important things, especially if you have ever doubted anything, especially if you've doubted your faith and beliefs. There is a difference between doubting God and doubting my understanding of God. Just as there's a difference between trusting God and trusting my understanding of God. Can I still believe in a God that I really don't know or don't understand? Can I really trust in a God that maybe things that I pray for don't happen? All right? Can I trust in something that I really am uncertain about? So can God be a mystery distinct from my concepts of God? So can your faith be in something that is so unknown that you really aren't certain about? Is that the kind of faith that you can actually have? Now, stage 1 and stage 2 would turn around and say no, because it's important to have those correct beliefs. Okay, there is that sense of dying in doubt when you move from, especially from perplexity into harmony. But what happens, it's almost a death of your ego or your pride. You kind of give up judging, having to know, and having to control. Another way of looking at that is saying it's a death to privilege and superiority. And we realize that we all share in the human condition. So in harmony, we see that the core of everything is God. We see that everything is harmony and beauty and belovedness. That means that God is in absolutely everything and in its purest form, whether it is human or non-human, it is God, because God has created us. We realize in stage 4 that actually understanding nothing is a confession that the mystery is deep beyond all knowledge, and it gives you a peace that passes all understanding. Can you find peace in mystery? I almost think that after COVID, we might be able to do that. I don't know. In harmony, there's a loving humility that begins to see things without that dualistic judgment of simplicity, without the analysis and how do we succeed the best in complexity, and without all the suspicions in perplexity. What is interesting is that in this developmental process, the first three stages all try to gain mastery, control, and judgment. Now, I am sure most of you have come to some point where you've realized there's things that you can't master. There's many things we cannot control, and there's a lot of things that we may judge that we find differently. We may be judged wrongly. So in harmony, we encounter things without a needing to control it. We encounter things without judgment, agenda, or suspicion. But we come across things with curiosity, respect, and love. So when something is very different that is brought to you, are you seeing that through a sense of respect, love, and curiosity, whether you accept that or not? All right. We could have turned around and said, you know what? Everything we need to do deals with love. And I think we would think that that's where we're at. My hope is that as we've gone through these stages, you've realized that not only do we have to progress through these stages, we have to do that with doubt. So if you don't doubt the dualism of simplicity, you would never be able to move into complexity. You'd never be able to move there. And if you don't doubt the pragmatism of complexity, the success of striving for success and being the best, perplexity would never become possible. You'd never be able to get to the point where you'd actually take a look at having some critical thinking and deconstruct some things. And if you don't do that, it's impossible to really move into harmony. So no stage is bad. No stage is an obstacle just because it wasn't stage 4. That's very much a stage 2 way of thinking of things. No stage is a destination, but it's moved us forward to harmony. And who knows what's beyond harmony? And there is beyond harmony. But harmony is that faith that expresses itself in love. Okay, try to explain non-dual thinking in your own words. Remember, non-dual is either or. What does that mean? How does that affect your life? Where are the times that you have very dualistic thinking, and where are the things that you may not have dualistic thinking? And then, can you actually imagine a congregation that could teach all of these stages? They could teach dualism, pragmatism, critical thinking, and non-dual thinking and seeing? Is it possible to have a congregation with everybody in a variety of stages? So now that you have the stages down, you may be kind of thinking that, you go from one stage to the next and then you finally kind of get to harmony and then things are all good. Well, no, actually, that's not the way this works. Sorry. Life is very messy and it's difficult, as if we needed to be told that. So that means on any given day, you may venture back and forth between stages, depending upon what life throws at you. He told the story of a man who came up to him, who he had gotten his book, and he wanted him to sign up. And he said, I've been doing a lot of reading about your stuff, Brian McLaren, and I really, really am appreciating and understanding it. He said, but right now, I just found out that my daughter has cancer. And he said, I need to move back to where it feels comfortable for me. I need to go back to stage 1 where I know that if I continue praying, she will be, healed. And And, Brian wished him well and understood and made sense to him. But his concern is what happens if you prayed right and your daughter still dies. When you are in that mode of thinking, that is what happens, is that you think that what you're doing by praying and your connection with God is making things work well for you. And we all know, of course, situations and people where that doesn't happen. So you can move back and forth between your stages. The other thing is that you can be at a stage based on the people you are with or situations you face. So if you are with and surrounded by a lot of stage 1 people, you are going to interact that way. That's why they always say you need to have more education to grow. You need to do traveling. You need to get and see with different people and hear different things. Otherwise, you will be stuck in the stage that you are at. The other thing is that the lines between stages are arbitrary. I mean, you can straddle stages. So, I mean, this isn't cut and dried the way it would look as, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can straddle those stages and do that. Or you could turn around and be functioning at a stage 3 with school or graduate school or a group of friends. And then when you go back to church, if it's a stage 1 church, you could work as stage 1 at that church. There really is no top, bottom, best, or worst. That's a hard one to get your mind wrapped around, but it is true, because in every stage that you go through, you learn something that you can take with you from the previous stages. And it's, positive and negative things that you will learn as you move through that. The other thing that's hard to hear is that the stages repeat. So it's not like you go ahead and you move forward and you stay there. All of the stages can be seen as 4 different ways of seeing and looking at the world, and it's 4 sets of skills at your disposal. Now, this made me really excited because I like to think that way, that you've got this at your disposal, and there may be some decisions or things that you make on a more stage 1 level, but on the other hand, there's other things that you may, go ahead and look at a little bit differently. And you can make decisions in stage 1 or stage 2 under the idea that you're working towards love. The other thing that made me excited about this is because it ties into the book we will be doing in the new year that talks about whole brain living and using the 4 different parts of your brain, which very directly ties in to the developmental stages that we've been talking about. All right, C.S. Lewis says, the most willing to suffer and die for their faith may also be those most willing to harm and kill for it. The most vocal, assertive members of any tradition, whether it is a faith tradition, a religious or political tradition, whatever, they are not speaking from a place of harmony. They are not speaking from stage 4. The most vocal and assertive are usually sitting at stage 1 or stage 2. The issue is that oftentimes, if you are involved in a religious organization, you are looked at as being a hypocrite because they have seen too many supposedly religious Christian people not acting like Christians. Well, the truth of it is that is true, but it is also true that happens in secular communities, people that are not involved in a church. That kind of closed-mindedness, anger, arrogance shows up elsewhere. So what we really need in our society, especially with what's going on now, is we need to help more people mature towards harmony. We need to have people move forward through the stages. So that in itself is a very strong role for faith communities. A lot of people think that that faith is dying because people are leaving churches. And people may leave churches because they don't provide the meaning, belonging, and purpose. or because they don't allow people to be in various stages of faith development. So what can happen is then people can go ahead and find unhealthy organizations to fill those needs. He talked about a man who was a leader of a strong white supremacist group. The man left the group because he kind of realized what was going on with that. And when this man was asked, why are so many people going into these kind of radical hate-based groups? And he said, it's because it provides them meaning, belonging, and purpose. So again, how is it that we are providing that for our congregations? But you need to know that there are actually many more stage 4 people on earth today. Of course, because they are not as vocal, we do not hear about that as much. But there is more people, and there is definitely more people inside of religious traditions that are in stage 4 than outside of them. And again, it is people that may not be the ones that are the most vocal. All right, faith, beliefs, and revolutionary love. Faith before doubt, it's about correct beliefs. All right, before you doubt anything, everything about faith this is correct beliefs. You believe this is how you get saved. This is what you need to do. This is who Jesus is. And faith after doubt is more about revolutionary love. All right, so let's take a look at that. When you're going through the beginning stages, you're learning and perfecting your beliefs. And again, beliefs are not bad. We need them. When we move into perplexity, you question those beliefs, but you may also question systems and the whole approach to faith and what that means. So the journey into harmony is a journey beyond beliefs. It doesn't throw the beliefs out. It's beyond those beliefs into love. And a revolutionary love means loving as God would, unconditionally, infinitely, graciously, extravagantly. So it is a love that goes beyond neighbor, stranger, other outcast, enemy, and even non-human. It can also mean loving with God, letting that divine love that God has fill me and flow through me without discrimination. Now, I know this sounds kind of woo-woo, but you know what? Think about this. Have you ever known you've been going into a situation, could be a family celebration, who knows, and you prayed to God to help you go ahead and deal with that in a positive, loving way? You leave that situation and you go, oh my gosh, I don't know how I ever did that. Well, that was probably because you asked and God was letting His love flow through you. So I'm sure many of you had that experience at one time or another. So again, when we take a look at beliefs, beliefs are necessary. They're interesting and they are unavoidable. We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But having beliefs is not the same thing as faith. Belief is an insistence that the truth is what one wishes it to be. All right, if we do this, we're going to go to heaven. Do we really know if that's true? No, we don't. That's a belief. Faith is that opening of the mind to the truth, whatever that truth may turn out to be. Faith has no preconceptions. It is a plunge into the unknown. You have to be willing to deal with uncertainty if you are truly looking at faith beyond beliefs. Belief clings to something, but faith lets it go. Belief clings to the fact that, okay, as a Lutheran, there are religions that really believe that we may think we're going to heaven, but we really are not because, we kind of don't have the correct beliefs and we're not doing it right. That would be a belief that clings. Faith would let it go and say, you know what, I have faith in God, that God has this in control. You may even say everybody's going to heaven. Okay, So Jesus never did say that his greatest commandment is, you shall hold correct beliefs about the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. And you shall convert your neighbors who do not hold correct beliefs. And if they will not convert, you will defeat them in a culture war. That is what we're doing in this society, in a lot of religious spheres. All right? I know what is right. I am going to convert you. If we're not going to convert you, we are going to condemn you. What did Jesus really say? He said to love God with our whole being and to love our neighbors as ourselves. To God, everything is love. So that emphasis on love is interesting because it's not just unique to Christian scriptures. Just about every scripture and every type of religion talks about love and putting love first and how God is with everyone. Even people that may be humanists or environmentalists, there is a real sense of love, loving the earth, loving, everyone, loving that. So, it's interesting. We don't have the market on God and his love. So what happens then if the deeper question is not whether you're a Christian or whether you're a Buddhist or an atheist, but rather what kind of Christian, Buddhist, or atheist are you? Now, don't get this mixed up. We're Lutherans. We don't want to talk about good works, but we're not talking about getting into heaven or getting right with God here. What we're talking about is walking the talk. We're talking about, if we talk about how God is love, how is it that we are actually showing that? Okay, so a person of faith. Are you a believer who puts your distinct beliefs first? Or are you a person of faith who puts love first? What is more important to you? Is it your correct beliefs, or is it love and how you show love? A person of faith contrasts with a person of beliefs. It reflects a shared desire among people in all diverse traditions to be identified not by a list of beliefs or a title or a denomination that excludes one another, but by something deeper, by faith in a universal, non-discriminatory love that calls us all together. A person of faith believes in love, and the differences are nothing more than something that is unique, exciting, and things that you can learn about. Talk about how different our society would be if this is what our main thing was that we're thinking about. So how do we have that revolutionary love in practice? We need more people in stage 4 harmony. And churches are very, very interested in wanting to get and need young people. McLaren was talking to a young woman and she said, you know what? Everybody wants us, the young people, to be in their church. They want the young people be there to save them, to save the church. They want them less as members or partners and more as fuel to keep their operation going. And Brian McLaren agreed with her. Then this is what he said. On the one hand, we have faith communities that are quite progressive in their methodology. They've got rock and roll music, online streaming, apps, the whole shebang. But under the paint, they are rigidly conservative and even regressive in their theology or their beliefs. Then, on the other hand, we have faith communities that are more progressive in their theology, but they tend to be rigidly institutional in their methodology. And so what happens is, for many of the young people today, There isn't a space for them that fits right. So he goes on to talk about how things are changing. What happens is as you move into harmony, faith meets life a lot more. And there are things that you will see God in things that would be seen as more secular, whether it's TED Talks or podcasts, different reading groups. We've all heard of the pub theology groups in bars and restaurants. The fact that religion and faith and exploring your faith can happen outside of the church walls. Daily devotions, there's tons of them that you can get online. Weekly podcasts and online resources, maybe many, many more ways that people are moving and growing in their faith rather than just going to an organized religion. And then groups and events that are focused on neighborhood outreach and activism that collaborate with other denominations and religions. So many times young people are looking at ways that they can get involved in helping their community be better and healthier. And what a wonderful thing if you had the opportunity to pull all of these religious organizations from different denominations and different religions together to work towards one thing. So the thing is that there is no better place to teach a developmental theory than in a church, whether it is dealing specifically with faith or if it is dealing with just moving through the developmental areas. So the big thing is, though, is you have to begin with the end in mind. So as you start to teach, what you're going to want to do is look that everything is pointing to unconditional love, revolutionary love. So in simplicity, when you are teaching the whole thing about right and wrong and selfish and unselfish, you make sure that you put in there that people have different beliefs and that you cannot be truly right without being truly loving. You need to be loving as you are learning these things. And the fact that boundaries, all right, we're not talking about in harmony being a doormat. We are talking about loving unconditionally, and unconditionally does not necessarily mean that you don't have boundaries. Everybody has boundaries. Society has to have boundaries because people are operating on different levels. If we were all operating on a solid stage 4, we wouldn't maybe need to have rules because we all be looking out for one another. I'm not sure that that's going to happen in my lifetime. But those rules and boundaries have value only in as much as that they allow you to help and love others. And that whole sense of identity is important, but we don't move it towards hostility and a thus and them. We don't move it toward, well, other people think this way, but they're wrong. All right. So that can be a way of taking a look at moving stage 1 forward in a loving way. The whole fact that scriptures, beliefs, rituals, and other treasures of faith tradition, they're absolutely important, but they are a starting line. They're not the finish line. Just because you can quote 80 million Bible verses and know the Bible inside and out only means that you started and got a great start. But where do you go from there? You have to move forward to showing that in love. In stage 2, complexity, you're going to talk about mastering knowledge and skills for this modern world, but pride, fame, power, or money is not the ultimate goal. So it'd be totally different than what society teaches. It is our knowledge and skill that gives us more capacity to receive and give love. It is, again, not the power, the fame, the money, how good we look. In stage 2, you really need to start teaching things with meditation. Chronologically, if things have gone along chronologically, this is with adolescence. This would be stage 2. Meditation, silent contemplation, the idea of mystery to introduce. Self-examination is really important here because if we can get to the point that we can see the things that we aren't good at, we can see our shadow side, still love ourselves, know that God loves us, we are going to be much better equipped to go ahead and show that love to other people as well. And then the problem is in stage 2, the greatest thing is usually popularity, power, or profit, or even pleasure. All right, we need to start teaching people that the greatest success is service, connection, community, and love. How is it that we see how we're connecting to others, and how we are showing that love? That is more of what is successful than something that involves money or prestige. Okay, perplexity, stage 3. Critical thinking and honest examination is really important. But that can also be used to be harmful. So we need to teach people how do you use that critical thinking to heal, so that that hate and disrespect for others and for the, it only hurts the common good. So again, critical thinking is good. It's good to be able to do that, but you can use that to harm people. Same thing with critical introspection. You look at your own blind spots, biases, and mixed motives. And then you see that as an expression to move you forward into healthy love. Often the times that we see the things that we can't do or how we've hurt other people, if we're willing to accept that and be open with other people, it forms a connection that happens in a very, very beautiful way. So stage 4, harmony. It is actually a widening of our perspective, he said. You're seeing more and more within the frame of connection, solidarity, and love. So you are seeing your neighbors, your neighborhood, your world, everything that God has created as being connected. We are all connected together. And there is a loving component in all of that. Now, I can't tell you the number of times that people have said to me, Stacy, how are we going to change the society? What are we going to do? How are we going to change the church? How are we going to do? The truth is everybody always gets disappointed, but you got to start with yourself. If you do not put a lot of introspective hard work in to changing and moving yourself forward through these developmental stages, you are not going to be able to help parents, children, and others, because you need to be a good model of the way that this life of harmony requires. And we know many people that are modeling good harmony. May not be all the time, but as we've said, you move in and out a lot of these stages. So, to finish up, Richard Rohr statement here, he says that unfortunately the notion of faith that emerged in the West was much more a rational assent to the truth of certain mental beliefs. So as our faith as we know it today, as our religion as we know it today, has been different than the faith of the East, it has been based in correct beliefs. So if you believe things correctly, this is going to happen. But there is another option. It's a calm and hopeful trust that God is inherent in all things, and that this whole thing is going somewhere good. That God is inherent in all things, and that this whole thing is going somewhere good. Can you imagine if you could live in that space, how calming that would be, how peaceful that would be, how loving that would be? And it is something that we can work towards. It is something that Jesus modeled. So we have a model of seeing how we can live in this world, of seeing how our faith does meet life. All right, I want to thank you for hanging in here with this stuff. It is a little bit touchy. It's a little bit hard. You can rub up against some sharp edges there. But I think it is something that's very interesting to think about. And I think it's something that we need to continue to work towards as individuals, as Augustana, as communities, and as our society and world. So the next video in this series is available on December 8th. That's this one. And then the Zoom discussion is on December 14th. If you would like to join in that, make sure that you contact me to get the Zoom invitation. I have given people other options on that, because if you run into this material and you just want to talk about it, or you have questions about it, or you have disagreements with it, feel free also to go ahead and email me. We can set up a time to talk. We can email back and forth. We can have a phone conversation. We could even have a Zoom conversation if that's what you want and how that works for you. So make sure that you know that that's an option for you as well. So this concludes the series this fall of And Yet. The new series will be coming out in the new year, and we will be looking at whole brain living. So if I do not see you before Christmas, have a wonderful one.